welcome back to another episode of the ABCs of ERP and Beyond, where we dive into the world of enterprise resource planning, or as I was just telling Nirav, my friend calls ERP, where we provide some practical tips, strategies for successful ERP implementations. And today's episode is part 2 of a 2-part series where we're discussing some implementation challenges that organizations will face and sharing a few tips about how to overcome them. So without further ado, again, joined by my fellow co-host, Nirav Shah.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Excited about part 2. There's a lot of fun stories we're going to share today to our listeners, and hope a lot of these, points that we're talking about, our listeners and those that are kind of going to embark on this ERP journey could use this to help guide them to successful implementation. So I think part 1 was awesome. We talked about some really specific points, some great ideas from our experiences, both put together, Peter. So I love that we're going to just build on that and talk about these next 3 points that I think are probably as important, if not maybe more, in some respects, to ensure that we overcome some of these challenges and we think about them now to have successful implementation. So super happy to get going here.
Should we dive straight in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so number 1 for the second part of this is resource allocation. Now, this is going to be a big one, I think, because you got a company, they want a new ERP, maybe because their old one they can't use, it's very time consuming, or they don't have one and they're having to do so much work manually. So they're already really busy. And the goal is to fix that with ERP. So now our biggest challenge here is, how do we find time between doing my job to implement an ERP?
Yeah, that's a challenge that almost every single customer of a new project faces. Resource allocation is, we're moving into our busy season, that we're just going to be so busy that we can't allocate too much time to it. I'm doing jobs for like 2-3 people right now. There's no way I could put this on top of that. Right? And the idea there is traditional ERP was, hey, we're going to have a consultant on site 8 hours a day. So it's going to be a military classroom environment. You're going to get a binder book of this big showing you exactly what every single field is in the system.
Yeah.
And you're going to go to town and learn the system, right? And it's going to be in a classroom environment, so on and so forth. I think a lot of that's changed now, and the partners that understand that there is limited time, customers have limited time to spend on this. So customers are trying to lean on partners, rightfully so, to say, hey, my industry, because you're picking a partner, right? Remember from our previous episode, that was one of our challenges. You need to pick the correct partner, right? And part of that was finding a partner in your industry that understands your industry well. So if you found that partner, they understand your industry, well, you hit the ground running. So instead of an 8-hour classroom environment 5 days a week, you're only maybe meeting twice a week for 2 hours or 3 hours at a time, and really just having concentrated strategic consulting with your partner to say, okay, here we're going to put in a sales order because it's going to benefit your customer, or this is because this is what you do currently in this specific way, and this is the data that we're going to capture. Here's the outcome of that training. Here's the specific homework that you guys have assigned to you, right? Come back and ask more questions. Here, we're going to follow up on this. It's very focused. It's very to the point, and it's taking out a lot of fluff and getting to the core of how to add value to the business on that, right? I look at resource allocation, and when we train, especially us in our company, when we train customers, I don't call it training. I call it business modeling because people don't have time to train, right? They want to kind of learn, hey, I'm doing this now. How do I do this but do it better?
Hmm.
And we understand how they do it now. Us as a partner, we find time to do that with them, right? It's kind of like an interview process to make sure
Yep.
we have fully understand what they're doing. So when we do embark and getting them associated and learning the system, it's more business modeling. Say, hey, this is how we recommend you do it. This is what you're doing. How we recommend you doing it. Do you have any questions? What are your exceptions? Here's how you resolve them. We're going to move on to the next topic. So it's really, really strategic. It's really, really focused to ensure that the resource allocation constraint is a real thing. It really is. And the last thing you want to do is put a burden on top of that. And like, you have this 5,000 pound gorilla that, oh my God, the company's just invested in, this software and they're paying, these guys 40, $50,000 to come and implement. Now I have all this work that I'm doing. I just have no time. We understand that
Yeah.
the right partner understands that, but we're gonna find some hours during the week. It's not gonna be 8 hours a day. We're gonna find some hours a week that are gonna continue to do your work, but you're gonna learn the system and continue to implement. Now there could also be times where they're gonna say, yeah, let's get this implemented within 4 months or 5 months because we're in our slow season, so before we get to our busy season, we'll have the system in place, right? But that's the ideal solution. Obviously, we want that. We can spend more time with the users, but if we can't, right, we have a way around that. But um, resource allocation is huge. That's going to help us, understand how much time they have to spend on the project, how long the project will take, ultimately, right, based on the time that we're going to spend on it, and to create the framework around the project. Who's going to do what when, right?
Yeah.
Type of thing, the three W's is important to ensure a successful project.
Yeah. And I think here, setting realistic timelines. You don't want to overstretch. Like, you know that you got your normal job to do. So you got to stick normal,
Yep. Yep.
realistic timelines to this stuff. And it's like, even a realistic time, I read an article about this, and it's, I can't remember what it's called. There's a law that says, that it always takes twice as long as what you expect. So it's like
Mm.
unrealistic timeline, then realistic timeline, and then actual timeline, and it's
Yeah.
always longer than you expect. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And that's just some of the things from the ERP implementation you discover during the business modeling phase or the pilot testing phase, right? And we had a really nice episode on pilot testing, user acceptance testing to ensure a successful test. You discover some things there that you just circle back from, but that's
yep,
part of the process, right?
yep,
But resource allocation, um, you need to have a well thought out plan.
yep,
Not just assume that everyone's going to be available every single minute
yep,
of the day for this project. They're not.
yep.
I had a prospect actually reach out. So they were running a five. Just a quick little example.
Hmm.
They're running like I think 3, 4 different systems. They're running QuickBooks. They're running an EDI solution. They're running Excel spreadsheets for their inventory. They're running they're running a CRM system, and their main issues were inventory control. Their other issue was manufacturing. The third issue was billing and invoicing, because it's not disconnected from inventory,
Mm.
so the inventory was off. And then they had another issue. They had a Mexico plant out there. And in
Right.
Mexico, there's a requirement for what's called IMAX. So a lot of companies take advantage of this government program that gives them tax savings to import raw material into Mexico. And this co-packer that they work with essentially does some service and adds value to their finished good, and then they send it back to the States for warehousing.
Right.
So they had this requirement that they needed this Mexico division to be up and going in 8 weeks. And the question they asked me, right, like, hey, we need to get this going, but how much time is going to be required to for our ERP project, right? I'm like, typically, if done correctly and we understand your resource schedule, we're looking at maybe 2, 3 hours, right? Every maybe 3 days, essentially. We could squeeze in, 2 sessions a day or 2 sessions a week if we can, based on different topics, and be able to do it. Even then, that customer thought that they didn't have enough time to do it. So they're like, well, can you guys just implement the system for us in 8 weeks? and us as a partner, obviously, we know best practice. We were against that, saying we're not going to take on the implementation of your system without any user input,
Yeah.
essentially at the end of the day. But what I told them, like, all you're doing now, yeah, you want us to implement, but then you're just adding one more system to your process. You're going to keep all these other systems in place because you
Yeah.
don't want to learn the ERP system, but now you're adding one more system that you're going to learn, essentially, right? On top of that.
Mm.
So we had a little back and forth and told them, hey guys, we really need proper decision making on what the resource allocation is to have a successful implementation. So they went back, they're still discussing, what the resource allocation is, to able to devote the proper amount of time to ensure a successful implementation. But that's an important point, right? You need to have, choose the right partner, and they're going to guide you correctly to ensure a successful implementation.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember who said it, but someone said when you're talking about actual time out of people's working day, it's when you say it as a percentage, it seems so much smaller. So when you say, oh, I need 2 hours a week, like 2 hours every week just for ERP implementation. Well, if you're doing a standard 40-hour week, it's 5%. That's
Yeah,
all it is. It's just
yeah,
5% of your whole week.
yeah,
It seems so
yeah,
different when you say it as a percentage. It's like, can you dedicate just
yeah.
5%
Totally.
of your, like, yeah, sure,
Yeah,
it's only 5%.
exactly,
It can be done.
exactly.
It can be done.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think that's the way they need to look at it. I think that's a very, very interesting point, and I hope our listeners, take into that account. Is like, hey, these are small percentages,
Mm.
um, to ensure success on this big heart transplant
Mm.
that we're about to do.
Yep. And sometimes as well, when you're analyzing this and whether it's going to be worthwhile, and I know that we've got an episode coming up about how we actually measure the success of an ERP implementation.
Hmm.
And one of
Hmm.
these is time saved, especially when we talk about like the automation opportunities in a new ERP. But it's funny that someone says, "Oh, I can't dedicate 2 hours a week for a project that's going to save me 10 hours a week." It's two very different things. It's like you need to spend 2 hours a week now because that's the way that you're going to be able to save 10 hours a week once it's implemented.
Exactly. Exactly.
Second point we've got is probably tied to this actually, and it's going to help keep the project on track both financially and time wise. And this is managing scope creep and customization. So, how do we balance standardization and customization? What's in and what's out? So, what do we need to think about in order to keep this on track?
Like we talked about our first point in our last episode, properly documenting your ERP requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You need to properly document your ERP requirements to keep that scope creep to a minimal, right? Very big, very, very important step in this process. That should be the guide, right? And what the project plan is made out of is a collaboration and an agreement between the partner and the customer on what that ERP requirement is for phase one
Mm-hmm.
and what that project plan should look like. Okay.
Yep.
Now we kind of touched on this on our last point in resource allocation a little bit that there could be times where something comes up in the pilot test or UAT testing that we feel that, hey, we didn't think about this, or something kind of we uncovered a gap in the current process that we need to evaluate and see how we're going to accomplish that, right? Could be a customization, a little bit of a scope creep outside of what we're currently doing, right? Or how we
Mm-hmm.
set the system up.
Yep.
So it's having that first fundamentally a good understanding of what the path looks like, which is part of the ERP requirements. And then it's once scope creep happens, documenting it correctly that this is a true scope creep and it's really not, hey, I think it's a scope creep, but there's a workaround to this, but we don't know what the workaround is. Let's
Mm-hmm.
first truly make sure it is a scope creep, okay? And not just kind of assume it's a scope creep or assume we need a customization, right? You need to be open and honest with your partner so they could educate you properly on, what's actually possible or not possible. Now, once we've identified that, is what is the true chain of commands to go through this scope creep, right? And it's going to be, okay, who needs to first approve that this is a scope creep? Then, what is it going to cost us? Who's going to approve the new design? Who's going to completely test it and roll it out correctly? I'll give you an example. One of a few examples in our call today. I had a customer where heavily modified system. They were a manufacturing rep, basically company. They did some in-house assembly, but essentially they were a manufacturing rep, and they had, I think, the whole Midwest for
Yeah.
certain solutions, products. And you consider a manufacturing rep, they make a lot of their money on commission. So they never even hold the product. So they'll sell something to a customer, and let's say it's for $5, but whatever they're selling, they're getting an 80% commission on. So there's really no inventory that moves. So in the ERP system, you're tracking their commissions, right? In certain situations, you're tracking their inventory movement, but it's merely a manufacturing rep type business. Ton of customizations, and they were necessary. But what we ran into is their hierarchy of managing the project plan didn't have any checks and balances. So the project manager was the same person that requested customizations. That was the same person that essentially approved the customizations and the quotes. We had this project manager that was in charge of running the project. He was a project sponsor, the project manager. He approved the customizations. He approved the quotes. It was a one-man show that did everything. I mean, there was like 25 users, but one-man show.
Mm.
That turned out to be a biggest risk in the implementation.
Yeah.
That whatever he thought was a scope creep, whatever he thought was a customization, was the thing that we were going to do. There was no, let's approach a committee and saying this is what the system, there's a gap in here, and how we should proceed with it. It was what he decided was what we're going to do. And the project went over by probably 30% budget because of that. And at the end of the day, the customer realized that that was a risk. And we had actually mentioned that up front in the sales cycle, that this was going to be the biggest risk, but they thought they had nobody else. And they didn't have enough time to put a committee together. And they went over by 30%. And even to this day, they come back and say, yeah, Nirav, this was definitely not the right decision we made at the time. But it is what it is at this point. And they could have saved a lot of money on some of that customization. So it's important that scope creep is going to happen, but have the right committee together to evaluate that.
Yeah.
A good partner is going to help you evaluate whether it's customization that's necessary. There's a workaround to it. What's the best option for you?
Yeah. And I think also not only has it gone over budget, it's going to go over time. And also you tend to get more locked in. You're not as adaptable and flexible to changes. When you started to go down so many different rabbit holes of customizations, you start to become reliant on that customization. So then when you might want to transfer onto maybe a new ERP, or even there's an update. I've had this before when there's been a major update to an ERP system that now breaks the customization. Now you've got more developer time, more developer costs to fix the customization to match the actual major update. And that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a good partner is going to help you say, yeah, this is a customization, but there's a third-party solution that's certified. That's a better solution that's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah. And some of these third-party solutions also, they are, if there's a major update to the actual ERP system, they will naturally update their third-party add-on, shall we say, to work.
Absolutely.
So you kind of get that update for free.
Absolutely.
I guess if, there might be licensing to actually get timely updates, but that's down to them to keep
Mhm.
their third-party add-on working with the actual main system itself. Whereas if it's something
Agreed.
bespoke, that's really down to you, like to say, do you still want this? We're going to have to put a developer on this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. And that one third party solution could help solve five or six other issues that are happening,
Mm,
right? Especially if they're within your vertical. So, it's important to manage scope creep and customization part of it and say, well, yeah, this customization could actually become part of there's a third party solution out there that's more
mm,
out of the box, and they also offer X, Y, and Z features that you're going to end up having to use anyways,
yep.
potentially. And it might be cheaper on a subscription basis than paying upfront for customization. Customization may cost $7,000, $8,000, let's say 5,000 to 6,000 pounds versus you have out of the box solution that's costing maybe $200, 160 pounds a month, something like that, right?
Mm,
And you get support, you get updates, and it's certified with the solution. So it's just like I said, ERP is a technology. You think of it that way. It's a mind shift than original ERP models.
mm,
It's like a phone. A phone is a technology. You keep adding apps to it because it helps you do different things and helps you do things faster and better. If you need to do something, for example, that's so unique to yourself, you're not going to try to develop a custom app for it and download it on your phone. You're going to go look for another app out there. There's probably an app that's already doing what you need the phone to do. So you're going to download that app, right?
yep.
Same approach. Why not just use the same model and concept to your ERP solution? Let's look that route first.
Yep. And this is more and more important when we look at ERPs that now sit on the cloud by default, because now you're kind of this. It's more of a SaaS model than it ever has been. Well, maybe it's
Yeah.
more of a PaaS model, as a platform as a service. So if it's a platform as a service, it's going to be evolving based on the actual platform. So as the
Hmm.
customer, you'll be looking after the data, the transactions going through it. That's on you, but you are in a platform as a service. So the software now, the underlying system will always be changing, will be updating. It's not a one-time event. It's not like you just buy it off the shelf, put it on your on-prem server, and
Right.
it
Right.
slowly goes more and more out of date. It's constantly
Yeah.
evolving. Like you said, with the phones and app model, you're buying into a platform. And the
Hmm.
more you have on scope creep and nice to haves, that gets more and more difficult to manage.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, how do you think we could tackle this? I know I've been on projects before where we have a designated scope creep person that calls it
Hmm.
out, whether it's in or out. Um, would you suggest someone like that that is more of a gatekeeper and says, well, guys, hang on, this is not what was in our original criteria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I tell you a little bit about our company. When we implement, we always assign a specific project manager with the lead consultant. So our
Right.
project manager is managing very closely that project plan. And if there's any scope creep, we're discussing that with our customer every week, going through the project plan, showing what we've accomplished that week, what we have remaining, to do still in the project plan, what just came up, appeared in the project plan, and we decide together, what do we do with this, specific creep? Do we table it for a little while and see what it shakes out? Maybe it turns into something bigger, maybe it turns into something smaller, um, or do we act on it right away? So that's the important part is to have that two-way communication in an ERP project with your partner, and a strong partner is going to have a dedicated project manager that's going to help guide you to a successful ERP project.
Mm. Yeah, sound advice, I think.
Hmm.
We are on our final challenge, and I think this is probably the hardest to solve, and it's probably the one that doesn't really have a straight answer. So, we've talked about things like data migration. That's a little bit more logical. What we decide to bring in, what we decide to house, it's
Yep.
pretty black and white. However, this final point is all around change management. How we deal with the change of this heart transplant in our business. How do we get teams on board who might be resistant to change? And the golden answer, Nirav, is I don't think there is one.
is no there's one better than others. I think in terms of what the solution here is. I think the solution is collaboration.
Okay.
Is the key word. Is to collaborate, right? It's not me or my team driving processes down your throat. It's saying this is the only way to do it, and this is the only way 500 other companies have done it, and they've all been successful. You got to do it this way.
Yeah.
It's more saying, hey guys, we're here to improve your business, improve your department, improve your job, make it easier for you to add value, and let's work together. Because I don't know exactly what you do day to day, right? And you don't know the system 100% yet. So let's work together and get to a point where we're going to have the system that's working for you, Miss Mary, or you, Mr. Abraham, right? How is this system going to work for you? Make it for you, right? And use us to make it for you.
Yeah.
I think that for us is how we break that barrier.
Yeah.
Where those users that are hesitant and resistant to change,
Yeah.
we're able to get them to see that change is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it improves their quality of work, gives them more time back in their day, establishes better relationships between departments. And once you could start to show that, is when you're gonna have this kind of ecosystem where change is organizationally healthy continuously for the company versus it being a one-time kind of choke to the company that let's just get through this and then we'll be back to where we were. Where correct change is healthy when you can continuously provide that environment to everybody.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that is where we've learned from so many years and so many different implementations. We come across people that don't even know how to turn on a computer, and they only do a certain thing all the time. And then next thing you know, you have to give them user licenses, and then they have to log in somewhere. Then they have to have internet access and do X, Y, and Z. But we got to start from the ground up with some of these folks, which is okay, because fundamentally everybody is a learner. We're all human beings. We all learn. At some level, we all enjoy learning, right? It's just how do you enjoy it? And that's where I think all the years of experience that we have of consulting to our users, we're able to break that barrier and get people and businesses to understand that this is a healthy change.
Yeah.
This is not a change to take away from anything that they're doing and risking anything for them. This is a healthy change that's designed to, ultimately create success in their lives.
Yeah. I think collaboration for me is the biggest word for this. Getting people to become part of the journey. Don't lock away the experts in a room or only the heads of departments and then instill it on the rest of the workforce. Never going to work, because that one hiccup, and there will be lots of hiccups in user acceptance testing, that one hiccup, if you go for that, people are going to go, see, told you, the old system was working fine. This one, it's so much harder, it's more confusing. You're going to get that if you're just going to instill a new new project, a new system on someone. Whereas if you have this collaboration and they have felt empowered to contribute to decisions, to contribute to ideas to the project, they're invested now. And when a problem comes, they're going to go, okay, I was part of this. I want to make this work. I've invested
Yep.
myself into this. I've said this is
Yep.
what I wanted. So I'm going to raise this and I'm going to work towards the goal of getting over this issue. You get all of that,
Absolutely.
um,
Hmm.
which obviously links into change management. You get all of that through collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think you nailed it right there, saying that if they're part of the process, they're going to open up. You're going to get healthy conversations across organizations saying, "Oh, I didn't even know you did that. That makes sense why I do this now. Well, now this particular process that we're implementing for you could actually solve both of our issues here. Hey, fantastic. It's great,
Mm.
right?" Um, that's the key. I always say successful ERP implementations, yeah, there's a software component to it. It's 80% people.
Yeah.
Man, it's 80% people. When people feel empowered and people feel that, what they're doing is adding value, that people listening to them, what they do actually is meaningful in the company, man, projects are just successful by leaps and bounds. They really are.
Yeah.
It's 80% people, 20% software, and that's what I've seen my time is, and I think that's one of our core competencies is that we're more people oriented, right? People, process, and product, right? I think that's totally the way our mantra works. Is that we want to make sure people are satisfied. We connect with people, in turn, understand their processes to help them find right products, and
Yeah.
that's ultimately is a great marriage.
Yeah.
Ultimately for an ERP project.
I think this works the other way around as well. If it's always going to be the people closest to the work, probably know the best. I think if you go down that way of thinking, you
Yeah,
also need to
yeah.
make sure that you're engaging stakeholders. These are the
Hmm.
people that might be really making the decisions, signing off on capexes. They might not necessarily need all the nitty gritty details. So I think really you need to think about engaging these stakeholders and go, look, this is the project, this is what we've achieved, this is where we're at, these are the next
Yeah,
steps we're doing next. Like a
yeah,
high level summary of where we are along this journey. Um, Here's a couple of bottlenecks that we're working on right now. Um, is it good? Are we on or are we off? They might not need to have all
yeah.
the nitty gritty. So they might not necessarily even be using the ERP, maybe even at all.
Sure, sure,
Um,
exactly.
but they might be the one signing the check. So
Yeah.
good. That wasn't too bad. It's a challenging thing. We
No.
probably made it sound a lot easier than it is, but maybe
Yeah,
there's some
yeah.
useful advice in there.
There's a lot of moving parts to these projects.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we could probably come up with another 100 challenges in any ERP project, right? But I think we picked out probably the most common that people encounter for an ERP project. These are big heart transplants. Every company is different, every industry is different, right? There's challenges from the publisher side, from the partner side. But the key, I think, takeaway, I think, from all of this is collaboration.
Yeah.
Is, if you're willing and open and honest about the good and the bad, right? And you see progress from both sides, then you can have a good implementation. So I've enjoyed talking about this, and I'm sure we're going to have plenty of other topics that we're going to expand on out of this in the near future. But um, this provides a great fundamental kind of thought process of how to start shaping your project now from the beginning to get everybody on board, to have the right requirements, to review your data, right? Now, finding the right partner, finding the right publisher in advance, because if there's all said and done, you're not doing another change for another 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So use the time right now to dot the I's and cross the T's.
Yep. Good. Look, this has been really fun over the last two episodes. It's been really insightful, and you've shared some great stories. So I've certainly learned a few things here, and I'm sure there's going to be a few things that a few people will have picked up on.
Yeah,
So, of course, if you have heard a few topics that we've discussed and you want to share your own stories, or if you've got any follow-up questions, Our contact details will be in the description of the episode, so feel free to reach out, and I'm sure Nirav, you echo the same sentiments.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. A pleasure as always. Take it easy, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Later, Peter.
Have a good one.